So the main collectibles in this game are, I crap you not, what appears to be nuclear waste containers and literal human corpses. Let's talk about it. Hello, everybody, it's your boy Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, here with a new microphone angle. We know how it sounds. We are here in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for the 10-hour update video. My first impressions after 10-ish hours. Ignore the fact that it says 11 there. I did a bit of an hour of just walking around the zone. So I'm roughly 10 minutes into the actual game. I do a lot of exploring, so I might not be further along in the main story as some other people would be at the 10-hour mark. But I mean, if for those who may not be aware, I'm in roughly Zone 2. This video won't contain many, in terms of story spoilers, outside of the location that I'm in, and the names of the main party characters. So, overall, what are my thoughts? For those who may not be aware, Xenoblade 1 is probably in my top 10 games of all time. Xenoblade 2 is in my top 5 games of all time. I freaking adore this series. I've been waiting for Xenoblade 3 for quite a long time. And what are my thoughts, my opinions, if you will, of Xenoblade 3 so far? Well, so far, pretty freaking good. I have some opinions. First of all, the gameplay at the 10-hour mark is probably better than, I want to say, the other Xenoblade games at the same mark, and I haven't unlocked all the mechanics yet. Xenoblade 2 starts off incredibly painachingly slow. It picks up tremendously, but it does start off extremely slow. 3 does start off extremely slow as well, as you only have access to 3 characters for a while. So you technically have access to 4, we can only play as the one, who is our pseudo-protagonist, maybe like duagonist, or whatever the hell that word is. Noah. The guy you've probably all seen, the guy with the sick ponytail. By the way, nice landscape in the background there. But as the course of the game progresses, you gain access to the other 3 party members. Now, they all have a different role. So let me just break this down real quick. You have 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 2 DPS. But the interesting thing about this game, and what I think will set this game apart from a lot of the other games, is what they have borrowed from Xenoblade X, and that is the class system. And the class system is what you kind of expect from a class system in an RPG, just kind of Xenoblade-ified. So, every character comes equipped with a basic class. For Noah, it was a sword fighter. But at the course of the story, you gain access to the Zephyr class for Noah. And the Zephyr class is the class for the other character, Mio, who will gain access to the Sword Fighter class at the same time. And this is essentially the part in the story when they teach you that, hey, there's a job-changing mechanic throughout this game. You can change who you play as, and you can change what they play as. It's pretty interesting, because as you play more of that class, you gain access to more skills, more abilities for it. So you have 2 leveling systems. You have the rank, and you have your overall level. Level's the XP one. Your rank is specific to the class. And for the class, you have certain arts, which are your basic abilities that you can do, then you can enact. So for Zephyr, I have access to Butterfly Blade, Air Fang, Wide Slash, Glow Ring, and Speed Demon. That's 5 arts. But I also have access to this kind of like pseudo-ultimate ability, which all classes get. And for Zephyr, I have this thing called Gemini Strike. It's a single target, does 540% power multiplier, which is really freaking good. And while I'm doing it, it evades attacks and boosts aggro generation when using art by 50%. So it has a few abilities, few advantages to it. The Sword Fighter ultimate is Overclock Buster. And what it does is a ton of freaking damage. And it boosts damage dealt when attacking an enemy that has the Daze status effect. So if the enemy has Daze, I can time it so this ult comes up, I hit with that ult, and the ult's going to do even more damage. You may be wondering, though, you may be having the question, pondering if you will, is this fun? Well, by itself, I wouldn't say the arts themselves are all that interesting. What makes it unique and what makes it interesting, what makes me want to build and really invest in these characters, is this over here. This these are your master arts. You unlock them at various levels. So I have access to one right now. All my characters are roughly around level 16. Yeah, they're all level 16 right now. But at level 20, I'll gain access to another master art. What these master arts are is basically you get an action, you get an art from another class you have access to, and you can use it whenever. So I have Ground Beat, which is a sword fighter job, but I'm a Zephyr. So Ground Beat is my, you guessed it, master art. So I have access to a sword fighter mechanic while as another job as Zephyr. This automatically intrigues my RPG brain. There are so many options you can go in this route, because I don't have to go with Ground Beat. Ground Beat is an AoE. I could go for some more utility. I could half my own aggro and be less of a tank but get an attack up. But with Zephyr's a tank job. I don't want that. So I'm not going to pick Shadow Eye. I could go with Myopic Screen. And what this does is it inflicts the Daze status effect. So if the enemy is toppled, I can apply Daze on Noah. But I have Daze on 2 other characters. So I don't really need this. So I've chosen not to go with Myopic Screen. Crash Out. Another front-facing AoE. And it boosts aggro generated when using the art by 50%. But it does less damage. So the question is, do I want to use that? I don't know. I have elected not to. I've elected to go for more damage. Because generally in Xenoblade games, the more damage you do, the more aggro you have. So you want your tanks to do a lot of damage. Generally. So this is what I've gone with. I've elected to go with Ground Beat. For my second art, I might go with Crash Out or something. I can do that. But I have the same level of customization for all of these characters. And I don't just have Zephyr and Sword Fighter. I have a range of other classes. I have Tactician, I have Medic Gunner, I have Ogre, I have Heavy Guard. Heavy Guard uses a massive freaking sword. Ogre uses a massive freaking hammer, which is actually kind of comically oversized. It's really funny. Medic Gunner literally has a staff that heals, but also doubles as a rifle. It's cool as hell. Tactician uses a bunch of, I don't know the exact terminology, but what they're called Mondo, which are basically little talismans that swarm around. It's pretty cool. But my Tactician and Medic Gunner are the healers. My Ogre and the Heavy Guard. Well, Ogre's an attacker. Heavy Guard is a defender. But you don't just have access to arts. No, there's more customization to be found here. And again, Xenoblade is at its best, in my opinion, when it's telling an interesting story, has dynamic and awe-inspiring visuals that are larger than life, fantastic soundtrack, and deep customization in its combat system and its characters. And I don't even have access to all the systems in this game yet, and I already have a decent amount of customization. For instance, you have class skills which are basically passives you have for each of the classes. But, like you had with arts, you also have master skills. So you can take skills from other classes that character already has, and put them on a different class. So for this one, for my Zephyr, I took the Sword Fighter talent, or skill, Cypher Edge. It boosts my crit rate by 20%. That's pretty nice. Like I said, that's pretty nice. Now, right now, I only have access to Cypher Edge, but as you can imagine, as the game progresses and the story progresses, we'll gain access to a lot more of these skills. This actually kind of leads into my main critique of the game so far, and that is, the game is incredibly hand-holdy to start off with. I'm 11 hours in and I'm still getting tutorials. I was expecting this because I played Xenoblade 2 before, and it's not that big of a put-off for me. It's just, the game is a slow burn. Do not expect it to start off with a ton of in-depth systems for you to learn and to really master. It's going to drip feed you these systems. It's going to really hold your hand as it shows you step by step how to play the game. It's going to do that, and if that's not for you, and you don't want to spend 10, maybe 20, and even more so hours doing that, the game might not be for you. But I am someone who can get over that. That doesn't really affect my enjoyment all that much. Because I know how fun these games can get later on, so I have no problem sticking with it. And my thing is, if there's like one thing about a game that it can really grip me, I can look past a lot of the other stuff. And for me, what really grips me is the mystery behind this game in terms of story. Because the story has a very unique setting and a very unique atmosphere for Xenoblade games. And I'm really interested in learning more about the story, learning more about the characters, and the world in general. So that's what I'm really interested in right now. The combat is pretty okay. It's solid. But I can't really compare the combat system with this game and the older ones right yet, because the older ones were also slow burns as well. You can make the argument with Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Because in that game, it didn't really lock a lot of systems behind time-gated progression in terms of the MSQ. Main story, and what it really did was it just gave you more characters as the game progressed. And by getting more characters as the game progressed, you got more options, more party compositions that you had access to. This game, in 2, gives you mechanics as the game progresses. Because we got what I assume to be the party going forward. We got them very early on. So now it's just a matter of getting the extra mechanics. Now, in terms of the world building, I mean, just look at that. The world's far more interconnected than previous entries in the series. Well, I think X is more in line with X, in my opinion. So this is the world map so far. We have the Forest region, and we have the A-tier region. So right now, this is the Forest region. And you can see it's pretty freaking big. We go to the A-tier region. Yeah. It's pretty big. And I haven't even explored all this here because I was locked off here. But the game essentially starts here, and you essentially follow your pathway down all the way to the Forest region when you get to where I am. So it may look very corridor based, and it kind of is, but these environments themselves are still pretty large. I can't go there right now, so kind of sad. But we can go here. And this is what I'll show you what I mean by it's deceptively open in terms of the world exploration. The game so far has been pretty good. Hasn't blown me away yet, but Xenoblade games are always just like one moment away from completely hooking me. I'm already hooked in terms of this game. I'm such a big fan of the franchise. But, God, the music. If there's anything this early on that I can just point to and say this is a 10 out of 10 feature, it's the music. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Every song is a freaking banger. I am not joking, I am not exaggerating. Every song is incredible. I have not heard one song where I'm like, oh, I gotta hear this again. No, they're all freaking good. But like I said, in terms of the overall game map, it kind of looked pretty linear here, right? It kind of looked corridor-based in a way. But Xenoblade is able to use a sense of scale to make it feel pretty big and make it feel larger than life. And that's one of the things I always really appreciate about Xenoblade World Exploration, was that it always had this way of dripping you into its world, no matter where you were. Just because of how beautiful it was, because of the music accompanying it. It's one of those things about Xenoblade that I love about it. It gripped me into the franchise that a lot of other games, and pretty much none of them, were able to do for me. It's one of the things I love about this game. The story so far is pretty interesting. I'm very interested to see where it goes. I think the roster of characters out of the 3, where I was in terms of 1 and 2, I think I preferred 1 and 2 in terms of their cast of characters compared to where we are right now. So basically the 10-hour mark for 1, 2, and 3. I think 3 is probably my least favorite in terms of cast of characters. Well, maybe X, but that's besides the point. But that's kind of by design. I think the one main issue this game has in terms of dialogue is when you're doing side quests, and you're doing the tutorial stuff for this game, the dialogue feels very kind of forced. And not just kind of, it feels very forced, it feels very static. It doesn't feel very characterized. It feels like they took a bunch of tutorials and just slapped a character name on them. If that makes sense. That's roughly how I feel with a lot of the tutorials in this game so far. But when you're actually in the story, and you're doing these quests, and you're doing even some of the side quests I have access to, which we'll talk about in a second, that's where I feel the characters shine, and I want to get to know them, because they're all different, they're all diverse, they all have their own different characterizations, their own different personalities, and I want to get to know them more. I want to see these characters expanded on. I want to see them utilized more. Especially with a game like Xenoblade 1 and 2, they drip-fed you characters as the game progressed. And what that allowed them to do was to focus on individual characters at a time, develop those characters, make you care about those characters. And then, when they had those group interactions later on, you were more invested in those because you had all this backstory, all this development for those characters already. But with 3, they kind of just throw these characters at you, and you have to see the interactions with one another and the development as a group. So it just feels like a bit more sudden than the other games. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and for me, it depends upon how they execute it as the game progresses. And that will really be the focal point in terms of whether or not you prefer this style of character building or the other. In terms of collecting, they went with a Xenoblade X idea here. Instead of having to stop, do a little bit of an animation or a skill check for every freaking node, you just have the item on the ground and you pick it up. Now let's show off combat a little. A new feature into the series. You can change character in combat. Thank God. Like, thank God. Which allows me to essentially swap characters in combat and do what I want to do with different characters. I love it. I have fusion. So remember those master arts I told you about before? You pair them in the slots and the corresponding class ability. If they're both up, you can use a master art that basically does both of them at the same time. It's an interesting system, because you're always having this back of the mind thought process going on as to if it's worth using this art right now or waiting for the other one to come off cooldown so you can use them in tandem. It's an interesting idea they got going for them here. Personally, I like starting off with the sword fighter. Why? Because they have a break ability. So this starts the combo. I gotta get to the side. I can do break. I want to go over to Senna, who already did topple, but it missed. So I'm not going to be able to stagger the enemy. I'm going to have focus attack enabled, so I have some kind of AI control here. So I can make him focus on the target I'm attacking. I can tell him to focus on fusion attacks first. I can move my healers into position and do some healing. Now, the AI is kind of stupid. And by kind of stupid, I mean really stupid. You have these, like, area of effects buffs. So you have to stand in a certain area in order to get access to certain, like, buffs. So, like this. Vortex. You stay in this area. Actually, no, wrong ability. So, hazy figure down here, right? If I do this ability, it's going to have a circle on the ground. The more characters that stand in it, well, if the characters stand in it, they'll get evasion up. A lot of characters just don't stand in the freaking thing, so I'm gonna have to manually force them to. I move over here. I'm gonna do sword strike to break. I'm gonna go over to Senna, who I think already did it, or the enemy just died. So I'm just gonna get my loot. Those are pretty low-level mobs. Let's go over to the other area and I can just do a quick combat sesh. But the combat so far is kind of like juggling, where you have a bunch of different characters, each with their own abilities that you want to keep track of. But you also are working against the AI, because the AI is going to be doing abilities as well. So you're kind of like juggling all these mechanics and making sure you can try and do them as optimally as possible. I keep pressing the wrong button here. Let's go here. Yeah, overall, I'm really liking this game so far. Xenoblade games are defined as the whole experience for me. It's not just a matter of the journey. It's a matter about the start, the middle, the beginning, the end. It's an entire package for me.
Might as well, yeah?
Come on, who else?
Xenoblade is a series near and dear to my heart, and right now, I had really lofty expectations for a 3, and I'm not disappointed. I feel like that's probably the highest praise I can give the game right now. But there's also another aspect I forgot to mention that I really do like. Top right corner of your screen, what do you see? You see ether, which are basically like little resources you can build up over time by finding ether nodes actually, in the open world. You build them up, they'll allow you to do certain things. You get Nopon coins. What these Nopon coins essentially allow you to do is circumnavigate certain systems. What these allow you to do, what they've told me so far, I haven't really used the system yet, is you can build up your ranks for these classes through combat, which you can also do. Is spend these Nopon coins to do it quickly and automatically. You can also do this with food, where you may not have the ingredients, but you can pay Nopon coins. So if you're familiar with Monster Hunter Rise, you know how it's like you can either use gold or use that like extra like currency you got to make food. It's kind of like that. If they manage to utilize this system correctly, this could be a really nice way to make grinding not annoying. Where if you have the resources, sure, you can use them, but if you don't want to bother grinding, you can just go get these Nopon coins and then use those instead. I like that because that is player agency, and that is putting control and agency in the player's hands, and I like that. So yeah, overall, also you have these little events here. I already did this one, so where you walk into it and you basically have to pick a side, and you'll get 2 different kinds of rewards depending on which side you choose. So this one normally rewards you with a Nopon coin. This normally rewards you with some extra money and some extra experience. You get base experience, you get some base money from these as well, but it's just a little bit more on top of that. So you can choose, hey, who do I think I can take on better, or which rewards do I want? I've been tending to go with the Nopon coins myself right now, and just building them up. Then you just fight the enemies, and you call it a GG. So far, I'm optimistic about the game's future. I'm really interested to see how the story progresses, really interested to see about the characters. We've had some big freaking mysteries, some big moments already. And I mean, look at that set piece. It's so freaking clean, so good. So overall, thumbs up for me. I'm looking forward to playing more of this game, and I'm going to continue streaming it. I'm going to continue streaming it even on this channel. So, thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.